Welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast, the show that invites you to take a seat around the community fire and listen to stories that inspire. I'm your host, Kathy Robinson, author, coach, and founder of Athena Wellness, a company that's dedicated to supporting you on your journey to live more wholeheartedly. Today's episode is brought to you by the Athena Wellness Academy, your resource for wholehearted living. The Academy's featured offering is an online course called From Type A to Type B, How to Mindfully Descend the Corporate Ladder and Invite What's Next. This course is perfect for you if you're contemplating or navigating a professional transition, and it's available as a self-study or with a small cohort of students facilitated by me, Kathy Robinson. To learn more, I invite you to go to athenawellnessacademy.teachable.com or click on the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome. Thanks so much for joining me. Today we get to welcome back two friends of the Athena Wellness Podcast from the early days. And what I love about this conversation is the real-time glimpse we get into how an external life transition can spur inner transformation. I'm joined today by Victor Briere and Joe Rich, the co-founders of the International Institute of Ayurveda. We first met Victor, who is an Ayurvedic doctor, in episodes 39 and 40, when he provided an overview of the Ayurveda healing arts and the importance of living in balance. And we met Joe, who was a longtime practitioner and teacher of Kundalini Yoga, in episodes 57 and 58, when we talked about the link between Ayurveda and yoga. Victor and Joe joined us again in episodes 93 and 94, when we got into the realm of authentic living and why there's no magic pill when it comes to our health. But it's been 18 months and 100 podcast episodes since that last conversation. And in that time, the International Institute of Ayurveda has relocated from Northern California to Tuscany, Italy, and expanded its operations to Goa, India. As always, we cover a broad range of topics, including using life transition as an opportunity for transformation, how to listen to your inner voice in spite of the fear it may surface, the wisdom of trusting your inner journey, an Ayurvedic view of the diabetes and obesity epidemics, and the role joy has in living with robust health and vitality. Links to the International Institute of Ayurveda and contact information are included in the show notes. A note on the audio quality. For some reason, a Zoom gremlin perhaps, all voices were recorded on one track, making the editing quite a challenge, and so I thank you in advance for your understanding. And now on to the show. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Victor, Joe, welcome back to the Athena Wellness Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
We're so happy to be here.
Happy to be back.
Coming from Italy to you this time.
It's amazing. And I will tell you, Victor, you are the first four-peat on the Athena Wellness Podcast. There has never been another. You hold the record. And Joe, you're back for round 3, which is also a record. So it's wonderful to see you both in Italy, which I can't wait to hear about. So it's been about 18 months since we last spoke. And before we get into all that's happening for our new listeners, I would love for you to share a bit about who you each are and what you do.
So I'm Victor. I'm an Ayurvedic doctor living in Italy, Tuscany. Montepulciano is the city, to be precise. And in the last 18 months, we've been dealing with moving to Italy. So opening up a clinic here, just actually this week, we have students from the United States flying over to Italy to join us and learn Ayurveda. And that's pretty much occupied most of my time for the past 18 months. That, and of course, we squeezed in a 3-month trip to India studying Ayurveda. And going to Goa and starting to establish a whole Indian branch of what we do.
And Joe?
Well, I'm an Ayurvedic chef, so I handle the duties of not only cooking for people when they come to the clinic or to around us and our friends and whatnot, but also educating people about their diets and helping them with the lifestyle changes, which probably we'll touch on today a little bit on transitions and whatnot. So that's kind of my role. Victor is more the doctor, and I'm more the help you make the changes you're going to need to make to get healthy. But I also have taught Kundalini yoga for 25 years. So, we bring that into, obviously, the aspects of yoga are great for healing. So that's there too. And spending time in Goa was terrific. Like Victor started to say, we're opening up a clinic in Goa also, and we'll be taking our students there next January to finish their education in India.
I love that role of helping people implement the doctor's orders, because it's one thing to say you need to do this, and it's another one to actually put it into practice. Aside from a few brief emails that we've exchanged just to keep in touch, we haven't spoken since August 2021. And so you have no idea what questions I'm going to ask, and I have no idea where the conversation's going to go, which is, I know it's going to be wild, and I know it's going to be insightful. So let's get going. Joe, you already mentioned this idea of transition, and the last time we spoke, you were just exploring the possibility of relocating to Italy, and you're there now. So I would love to go back. What was the impetus for the change?
Everybody talks about changes, and everybody talks about wanting to find a way to bring new things into their life. So, I can't go around telling people to do that, helping people do that, and then not do it myself. So for many years, I've been wanting to explore a different culture, get around a different way of thinking, even if it's very different from mine, even if I don't agree with it, that is not the point. So coming to Italy, taking on a new language, taking on a new culture, although it's similar, of course, but just seemed like a maturing thing to do. Also teach me how to help others. So that's important to me. And really that's the impetus of we're going to go into Goa and India, and we're going to do the same thing again. And so that'll be really a big change. But I'm a big believer in transitions. And I think that people need to get out of their comfort zones and predictable zones and get into the adventure of life.
Anything you would add to that, Victor?
Yeah. So to be honest, when we first brought up the notion of moving to Italy, it brought up a lot of fear for me, because we had this whole thing established in Northern California. And it was like, wait a second, can't we just sit in this thing that we've created and just, hang out there? And so I had to go through personal transformation and confronting some fear inside myself about my own comfort levels versus adventure levels to be able to wholeheartly make the jump to Italy, and then again to India. And so now looking back on at least that part of the adventure is ongoing. But if I had remained in my little fear bubble, looking back on it with the eyes I have now, I would have definitely regretted that. And I could say that with confidence now, but at the time it's like, whoa, slam on the brakes, right? So thank God I had someone in my life, mainly Joe, willing to talk to me about it, not just say, do it or don't do it, because the communication around it is how we explore ourselves through a transition.
I have some questions on and some thoughts on transition and transformation. But before I do, something else just came to mind. So I've been to Italy. I'm half Italian, and I've been to India. And so I'm thinking of you guys, knowing you guys from Northern California. What was the level of acceptance to the practices that you offer in Italy is one question. And then secondly, Ayurveda is a way of life in India. What was it like from an acceptance standpoint of two Westerners coming in, establishing an arm of a school? So I'm interested on both sides of that question.
I'll speak of Italy. Okay, so we're still gauging the acceptance levels in Italy, but I will say this. Everyone in their heart of hearts seems to accept kindness. Now, when you first put that forward, you're probably going to get a lot of defense mechanisms from people because it's vulnerable to accept kindness. And people don't like feeling vulnerable for the most part in the West. But a lot of people who are willing to kind of swim in those waters, they're more curious about whether you're going to be kind to them and whether you're going to be a genuine help to them than they are about the content of the word Ayurveda, so to speak. So if I found that when we approach people with that spirit and they do decide to resonate with that spirit, that it's like, okay, cool, I accept you. Now, what is this thing you do? And sure, I'll try it. Versus people who are just, nah, I'm not interested in any of it, the whole package. So I think it's less about the modality and more about the person delivering the modality.
Love that.
As far as Goa goes, open arms. Victor is going to be participating in a clinic with one of the top Ayurvedic doctors in all of Goa, immediate acceptance. In fact, he makes a joke that people there will listen more to a white guy from the West than they will to. We thought that was funny. Also, we're going to be doing some other things. I'm going to be working with a pediatrician, Ayurvedic pediatrician there to provide a kind of like a wellness clinic for women getting pregnant and having babies. But my role will be purely as the chef again, and just providing them high quality foods based on what the doctor says and stuff. So it'll be a collaboration. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited about that. The people in general are just open arms with us in Goa in every aspect. And we're already on TV in Goa.
Oh, really? You're international celebrities, are you?
Yeah, man.
Nice.
Yeah, but like he was saying, the open arms thing, that kind of like the TV celebrity joke aside, that is kind of how we've noticed the flow in India versus Italy or even the United States. It's like you just kind of like go in with open arms and everyone's open armed. And before you know it, you just one day it's like, okay, I do a news channel. Come on, let's go. And it's like, okay, you're there and now you're on TV. It's like, whoa, very different than the West,
Yeah.
I'm expecting a call from Bollywood personally.
I want to see that.
You're coming with us.
So I want to talk a little bit about transition as an opportunity for transformation. And to be able to frame this, I just wanted to share how I think about both terms and then get your reaction to that. So transition for me is this external process of changing from one state or condition to another, like deciding to move from California to Italy. That's a transition. Transformation is more of a metamorphosis that can be spurred by the intention that you bring to it and wanting to have more of a deeper shift. And so depending on your past experiences or your frame of mind, transitions can be challenging. What you were experiencing, Victor, when all those fears were coming up, and it can be a time of stress, but they can also be transformative and have deeper meaning, such as, wow, everywhere I go, because I'm bringing kindness to this situation, people are reacting to me in kind and are open to what I'm doing. So with that as a backdrop, I'd be curious on any transformative turning points that you've been seeing or embracing over the last 18 months, besides the ones that you already shared.
For me, I think the biggest thing is the challenge to the creativity. We teach in yoga the idea behind getting your kundalini to rise. But one of the big things is that when that does happen, it increases your ability to create. And creation can't happen without vulnerability. So it opens that door for yourself, and then it gives you that self-exploration. When you're out in public, you feel the vulnerability. You have to, otherwise you can't create. You have to go out there and start clinics, and maybe you'll be rejected, or you go on TV and maybe people actually think you didn't say things too well, or you can be made fun of or criticized. But when you go home, then you self-evaluate all of that, and you start finding what's been blocked inside of yourself. So you get into the idea of reconnecting with the authentic self after childhood traumas and stuff. And, I think that's an endless process. I don't think you're ever going to reach a time when you're not having to do that until the day you die. I think that's what I would point at for people the most is like, stay relaxed. Have someone in your life that my favorite term is the critical lover, somebody you really trust, doesn't have to be a professional, but can be, could just be a really good friend. So it doesn't have to cost you $350 an hour. And, somebody who can call you on your stuff, but does it, you totally trust that it's being done out of love, and move through these transitions and then allow it to transform by doing the internal work that comes when you have to challenge your own risk, willingness to be vulnerable, willing to fail, willing to be the man in the arena, as the Theodore Roosevelt speech talks about. I think that's the core to it, because even if you bring it down to a much smaller thing, like just walking into an Ayurvedic doctor's office and him saying, okay, to heal this health problem you have, you've got to make some fairly big lifestyle changes. So it doesn't have to be like this monstrous change like I like to take on, but it can be just what we would consider a fairly small change in your diet, or give up drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes or something like that. But I think the process is the same. I can point out like, oh, I moved to Italy or I moved to Goa, and it seems like a big deal. I don't think so. I think it's just as big a deal for someone who's addicted to nicotine to have to give up a cigarette. So, I say find community, find people who can help you question, really reflect back to you, be the mirror for you, and, just give yourself time, but you have to face it with courage. It's going to require courage.
So I get on a personal note, I would like to say so when I was looking at moving to Italy and everything that meant, and, my mind started generating situations in the future, and a lot of them were fear-based. And, looking back, not a single one of those fears came true, not a single one. So, I could stop the process there. So that would be, okay, I made a successful transition. I like your definitions. I made a successful transition, right? I'm here now. It's all good. No catastrophes. Okay. But then the transformation, I think, requires an extra question for me, which is, if I'm going to transform, I have to ask myself, why did I even generate all those fears in the first place? And I think that's a really much more challenging and transformational question, to really look at myself and say, why did I even approach this transition the way I did? So that was the beginning of a transformation process. And yeah, I completely agree with Joe. Someone going to give up a cigarette, just to keep it the same example, they have to ask themselves, why am I even doing this in the first place? Not just, hey, was I able to stop or not? One's a transition and one's a transformation. At least that's how I would see it.
Yeah, that's a great example. And, you're listening to your inner voice. Somehow you had to be attuned enough to be able to hear that whisper. Do you know where that came from? Or can you remember that moment where it was just like, people would love to be in the position that you were in the situation that you were in California, and the clinic and the clients, but something was rearing its head up. What was that process like?
Well, okay, so I'm going to take that into a yogic position, and then Victor can talk. So it's the voice of the intuition, right? And the intuition is the voice of the soul. So if you take that into psychology, you're talking about reconnecting to your authentic self, the soul representing the authentic self in a human being. And so that connection, that practice of doing that and healing the wounds that cause the separation, which is childhood trauma. When something calls out, when you hear the whisper, it's not just, and this goes with what you're saying, Kat, it's not just the action of moving to Italy. It's all that entails. And if you are truly listening to your authentic self, giving that voice space, acting upon it, having the courage to act upon it, heals a lot of your childhood trauma that, has suppressed your voice, suppressed your creativity, suppressed your courage to make changes, and threw you into a lifestyle comfort and predictability. And I'm not saying everybody needs some of that, for goodness sakes, come on. Everybody needs some of that. But I think to the individual, we're beginning to have a suppressed voice. And I think democracy is not going to do well with that. So, I just want to put that out there to everybody. I don't think coming to Italy was something I had to do to fulfill my destiny or anything like that. I think creating change and being creative with my life is what's fulfilling my destiny. I could have moved to Timbuktu, and it would have required the same level of creativity.
I love this idea because what's passing for creativity, we have people who are content creators and that's what they do for their living and it's all over social media. But you hit on the word, Joe, there's no spirit in that. And so the act of creation and what you're both speaking to is that your life in itself can be an act of creativity and creation.
Yes. It brings out the best in you, I think. It really does.
Victor, could you share a little bit more about when you were starting to hear these whispers and this fear was coming up? How did you work with that to get to the point where, you were willing to make and excited about making the move?
Well, I did want some of my patterns from my childhood first, which is suppress it all and not talk about it. And then fortunately, I had people in my life, Joe, my wife, and the people around me who knew me so well that they could say, you're doing that thing you do when you're in fear, right? And I'm shortening the process. This is a longer process. But then ultimately having the courage to open up and express the fears and all the consequences that might bring, right? People might get angry at me if they don't like what I'm saying, on and on. But again, none of those fears ever came to pass. So that was, I think, the first step. And then I had some opening to actually explore, well, what does this change mean? What would it mean? And why, it's not Italy, right? It's we have to pick a place because we have to, and we might as well pick the coolest place we could possibly think of. But I think it's really important for people to know it's not and same is true in the reverse with disease processes. It's not the cigarette that you need to pay attention to, right? It's everything behind the cigarette that you need to pay attention to. And then in digesting all the illusions of that, now the new thing unfolds. And the new thing did turn out to be Italy. And now it's going to be something else because then I can't make the same mistake of getting attached to Italy. Then I'd just be making the same mistake of getting attached to Northern California, right? And so, but the mind, at least most people's minds, of course, wants to pay attention to the external and the ramifications of all that because, we care about our safety and security and all that. But I think if we get too far out of balance and caring too much about our safety and security to the point where we completely shut down our creativity, we start to develop disease. Everyone suffering from disease, it's chronic, heavy, serious diseases, is on some level suffering from that.
I cannot disagree. And I love this idea of embedding Ayurveda to the point with, you said digesting illusions. And I know the last time on the show, we've talked about how important it is to be able to calmly ingest when you're eating, and you're talking about taking it broader to experiences. I've found that, I was on a very standard path for a long time. And I found that when you step off the beaten path, I've had to put trust in something very different than what I was putting trust in. So this idea of attachment. So my question to you is, how would you describe where you put your trust and faith as you're embracing these types of moves, even though they're more internal than external?
Okay, that's a big question. Yeah. So, in my intellectual idea of myself and, when I'm thinking of myself as this wonderfully enlightened person, I say spirit, right? But the reality is that by the time I get into my day-to-day, moment to moment, and my nervous system is challenged by all the ghosts of the past and present, then I really do put my trust and faith in the people around me that I trust and have chosen to trust as not someone to dictate what I do, but as someone to communicate with me about what I do and why and what the group is doing, so to speak. And I think that that's a necessary part because we all have different triggers. And so when I'm triggered, even though I can look at the person next to me and say, well, they have all these flaws and triggers. I don't like the word flaw. They have all these triggers too, but their triggers aren't the same as my triggers. So I might get triggered in a situation and they might be perfectly clear. And so when I know the feeling of when I get triggered at this point. So when I feel that feeling, I can turn to one of those people and ask for help. And I think that's a really good excuse my language, BS way of applying spirituality into day-to-day life.
Joe, would you add anything?
I think I have a lot of self-confidence. I've lived long enough, much older, as he likes to say.
Yes, much older.
Much older. And I've failed enough times in my life that I'm not afraid of that anymore. So I think I just have a lot of self-confidence that if I stay in touch with what I'm calling authentic self today, or we could say the intuition or anything like that, and just, keep going. And yes, there'll be good days and bad days, but don't lose faith in yourself. Don't lose sense of purpose, and just move forward. I always align myself with a sense of purpose that is in service. So like I say, when I'm excited about opening up a food, maybe kind of a restaurant sort of thing to serve women who are wanting to get pregnant, who are pregnant, all that, a wellness clinic, I'm in the service of those people. So I think as long as I see that that's what I'm aligned to, is serving the people, and it's feeling good to me, and knowing that I may fail or I may have a bad day, but I'm good with that. I'm okay with that. I'll just keep on going. And I know I will, because I've done it 20 times now. And I think that's, you just follow your own divine path there. You find your way. And it's amazing how people show up to help you. That's always the most fun part for me, is that all the people who come along and join your team, and now you get to have great relationships with them. And that is the best part of it all, because I'm a relationship guy. So to me, that's what it's all about. What relationships did we create, and who did we help today? It seems like the rest always takes care of itself eventually,
I think that's one of the benefits of having some years under our belts, right? That we can look back. We have the benefit of looking back more than Victor, to be able to say, you know what, whenever there is those down cycles, it was preparation for something else that was happening. Like, you can see the seasonality as life moves on. And I think that lets you relax into the process a little bit more and embrace it. So well said. I'm curious to know how you both have changed in the 18 months since we last spoke.
Well, Victor got his hair cut.
Yes.
I've noticed that. You're looking very Italian, very handsome.
There you go.
That's probably the biggest change right now.
I think I've mellowed a little bit.
Yeah. No, I'd say that's true about you. I'd say I wouldn't use the word mellow. I would say you take even when you know that the situation requires toughness, you find a way to be soft. That's how I would describe it, the change. So I don't know how you think I've changed.
The haircut.
I was looking for something a little deeper there.
No, Victor's he's losing his fear. He's getting in touch with his authentic self. He's doing what you just said, Kath. This is his first, season. He's like, oh, okay. The world doesn't come to an end after all, we'll be okay.
Well, you gentlemen always have a passion topic, something that's really lighting you up. So I'm going to open the mic and let you talk about whatever it is that is exciting you these days.
Well, Dr. Briere is going to be writing a book on diabetes, so I'll let him talk about that. But that's what's lighting him up these days. We're really going to get into weight loss and diabetes.
Yeah, the psychosomatic origins of disease, the major texts of Ayurveda just like scream it. Basically, they say, look, if you have a disease and you think that it's just your body, you're insane. I mean, they're actually harsher about it than I just said it. But I am very passionate about the world waking up to that reality, like for once and for all, like stop it with this, metformin, you can just take a pill and you're going to be fine and you just get to trudge on. And the word trudge, I want to emphasize because that's what it's like. But that trudging is the real root of the disease, not the sugar imbalance in your blood, And so the calling or the voice I want to express to everyone is like, look at this disease, diabetes, that has just become a way, way worse epidemic than COVID, like times 50 worse, right? But it doesn't get the same press because it's not as, sexy of a disease as COVID, right? It's not as acute but it is like way more severe. It's way more life-threatening. And not only, but forget the life-threatening part. Death is the least of everyone's worries. It just cripples you for your life and makes your life just miserable. And it's not being given enough attention. And it completely a lifestyle-driven disease in 95% of cases, right? Save a few rare cases. But most of the time, it is completely lifestyle-driven. And those lifestyle habits are based in what we've been talking about so far, and fears and separation from our sense of self and all that stuff. And I really do love talking to people about it, even though it's a very hard topic, because it feels, while it might be sorrowful and challenging, it's meaningful, it's relevant, it's what's happening, and we got to stop ignoring that.
There was a moment when everything was happening with COVID and, people were saying, if you're obese, if you have diabetes, those were the folks that were really in distress. And so I'm really heartened that you're going to start that conversation, because I do think it's really important. And it's a few things, right? So we have this opening now, but we also have a culture that supports all of the habits that reinforces fast food and diet sugary drinks and all of those other things that help people trudge along. I like that word, and not live with the vitality. And do you think it's because it gets to the point where people don't even remember or think that they can live with vitality?
I think so. I'll talk about it in the Ayurveda lens. Ayurveda has called 3 pillars of health. One is ahara, which means everything you take into your body that builds your body. Food, for example. We'll just keep it super simple, right? The second is sleep, how well you sleep and the quality of your sleep. And then the third is basically how you use your energy. So your creative energy. And that's a pillar of health that is completely suffering and just getting completely eaten away at the bottom. And yeah, I think people have lost the connection with what it means to know how to create a sense of vitality. And unfortunately, the first reflex, where do I go if I need help, is basically, well, I just do that if I'm sick. But the definition of sick is like, I basically have to be practically going to the hospital or have something so chronic that I can't function. But in Ayurveda, that's not the definition of sick. In Ayurveda, the definition of sick is if you're not living every day with a sense of joy, you're sick. And there's a big gap there. And so, yes, I do think that in the West, we've lost touch with that. And if it doesn't come back, we're going to just watch the culture get sicker and sicker and sicker and compensate more and more and more. And it doesn't work. Come on, we can take, I'm not saying we can control our health, like we can make everything work perfectly all the time, but we do have a large influence on our health over a lifetime. And that includes the realm of, if you want to call it, the mind, but don't think I'm talking about like psychotherapy. I mean it in an integrated, holistic sense.
It's funny whenever this topic of joy comes up, I put myself in my corporate days. And whenever someone said, you really need to incorporate more joy in your life, it's like I wanted to knock them out. Like I don't have time for that. Right. And now I see it from your lens of this isn't about sitting in some field somewhere in a lotus position for 12 hours a day. This is about how do you embrace your life, not only for yourself, but for the people that are around you and the people in your community. How do you become part of this thriving ecosystem? So I think that's the spirit in which you meant that. And if so, how might they invite a little bit of that joy into their lives to start to see some of these positive changes?
So turn off your TVs, get off of social media, and quit thinking that the I is the it. It is not. It's the we. And we need to get back to that and reach out and help somebody. And you don't have to go volunteer at a hospital or anything like that. There's somebody right down the street who could use a helping hand. And it'll make you feel so much better about yourself. Then you'll bring that happiness home to your family and start maybe being a little bit kinder to everyone in the house there. We have to come together. We have to. We're not being given a choice. If we don't all hold hands and start calling each other brothers and sisters here and stop with the violence and the hatred and the prejudice and this crazy stuff, we need to change. We need to get going here. So that's my 2 cents. And it's 2 cents.
Dr. Victor, speak to us on joy.
Speak on joy. Joy is not happiness. I think joy lives underneath all that kind of what we learn in preschool as our emotions. And it's got more to do with meaning than it does to do with emotional states. I think that's really important. And I think we can only find meaning in relationship. Basically, that's why Ayurveda has it as a third branch of health, or a third pillar of health, is how we use our energy in relationship to others, because it's that important to our being. And so I think joy is the attitude of being a part of that whole interwoven interdependence, while also learning the skills of being able to set boundaries and, the stuff we can't get into in whatever time we have. But like there is a way to do it. I know people get very confused around all that and emotional confusion, but I promise you that it's there, and that if you can not give up on yourself and don't even inside your mind discard others, because joy is dependent on our interrelationship with everything, not just people, every animals, nature, all of it, whatever you want to say, whatever words you like to use. Joy is not done in isolation. That's all I'll sum it up.
Yeah.
Tell us what's next for the International Institute of Ayurveda.
Well, we've got our American students coming here to Italy tomorrow to do their practitioner course. We have a course that's dear to our heart called Ayurveda and the Vagus Nerve that starts in May. And that's about understanding your own autonomic nervous system and why you can sit there and saying, I'm going to quit smoking while you're smoking a cigarette. It answers a lot of questions about addiction, and not just the physical addictions, but the emotional addictions we carry. And we have a intro to Ayurveda lifestyle, how to actually apply it to your life here in Italy in September. We have Goa. So if you want to go to Goa and experience India and Ayurveda in India, that. And then we also have a fully woman-run retreat at the very end of September here in Italy for 6 days. And it's women only. Sorry, guys. We can do a men's retreat if you want another time. But this one's all women run, all women participants, about reuniting with your authentic self and having conversations around that and exploring that topic in a safe place.
Tell our listeners the best way to get in touch with you. How can they find you?
Not only will I tell you the best way to get in touch with us, I actively invite you to get in touch with us. So just email reception@iiayurveda.com. And that's Ayurveda as an International Institute ayurveda.com. And if you reach out to us, then Joe would be more than happy. This is completely free, no strings attached. We're not going to try and upsell you. Joe will give you a numerology reading based on your birthday. So if you send us your birthday, he'll do that. And then I like to offer like a mini Vedic astrology reading, like 15 minutes. So if you email us your birthday, birth time, and birthplace, I'll do that. And then that lets us meet you. We get to know you a little bit. We get to bounce off of each other and be connected.
Sounds wonderful. And Rich and Victor, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's much appreciated.
Let's do it again.
When Victor writes his book.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know there are many ways you can spend your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with me. Until our paths cross again, be kind to yourself and show your warrior spirit some love. If you know anyone who could benefit from today's episode, please pass it on. And many thanks for supporting the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It means a lot, and it helps others find their way to our circle. If you'd like to access the show notes, have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode, or would like a transcript of this episode, visit www.athenawellness.com/podcast. Until next time, be well.